snow was falling hard across the mountains. No one dared to go out in this weather. The wind howled like a beast, and the cold bit through even the thickest coats. In the middle of all that icy chaos, an old ranger's cabin stood alone on a hill. Inside lived a man who didn't expect much more than silence and solitude. Then came the sound, a soft thud, followed by a faint whimper. Not human. Something else. Something desperate. He stepped outside, wrapped in layers, breath puffing in front of him. Through the white blur, he saw 2 wild mustangs standing near his gate, shivering, weak. One of them had a leg that buckled beneath it. They weren't running from danger. They were asking for help. His name was Jonah, once a soldier, now just a man trying to forget. He hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks, not since retreating to this forgotten corner of the world. But here they were, 2 horses, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion, begging without words. He opened the gate. What happened next changed everything. Inside the cabin, Jonah paced. Fire crackling in the stove, coffee warming on the side. Boone, his old shepherd dog, watched him closely. He knew what people said about wild animals. Never get involved. Never interfere. They belong to the land, not to humans. But those eyes. The younger horse had fallen twice already, its body trembling as it tried to stand. The older one stayed close, protective, watching Jonah with wary respect. They needed shelter. He grabbed hay, blankets, and whatever medical supplies he had left over from his time overseas. His hands shook, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Fear? Guilt? Maybe both. When he returned to the pen, the older mare sniffed the hay cautiously before stepping aside to let the yearling eat. Jonah approached slowly, blanket in hand, heart pounding. He wrapped it around the smaller horse, careful not to startle it. The injured leg was swollen, probably sprained or worse. He did what he could. Wrapped it gently, murmured soft words, kept his movements slow. Boone sat nearby, ears twitching, watching every move. It wasn't much, but it was something, and for the first time in a long while, Jonah felt like he mattered. Morning came quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind fresh snow and brittle air. Jonah stepped outside, boots crunching through the frost. The horses were still there, both alive. The young one struggled to rise, but the older mare nudged it gently. Helping it up, Jonah felt a lump in his throat. They were surviving together, just like he used to do with his comrades back then. He brewed coffee, staring at the pair through the frosted window. His mind wandered to places he rarely let himself revisit. Memories of war, of friends lost, of a life he thought he'd buried. A snort broke his thoughts. He looked out again. The older mare met his gaze, eyes deep with something he couldn't name. Gratitude? Trust? He wasn't sure. But he knew one thing. He couldn't leave them out there. Days passed. Jonah tended to them each morning, checking the bandage, feeding them, speaking softly when they flinched at sudden sounds. Slowly, they grew stronger. The yearling could walk without limping too badly, though the legs still pained it. The mare never strayed far, always keeping watch. One night, as he sat by the fire, Boone curled beside him, Jonah caught himself smiling. A real smile. Not forced, not faked, just there. He hadn't smiled like that in years. Then came the footprints. Outside, near the fence line, fresh tracks pressed into the snow. Human, not his. Jonah's stomach dropped. He called Boone, grabbed his rifle, and followed the trail. It led toward the trees, where the wind whispered secrets through the branches. He found her, an outsider, wrapped in thick layers. She introduced herself as Dr. Lila Reyes, part of a group tracking lost mustangs. She explained, these 2 had been separated from their herd during the storm. If they didn't find help soon, they wouldn't survive. She asked if he would help reunite them. He hesitated, then nodded. Together, they made plans. Lila had a team waiting down the canyon, ready to transport the mustangs to safety. But the roads were blocked, the snow too deep for trucks. They needed another way. Jonah had an idea. Old Charlie, the snowmobile he barely used anymore, was rusted, but still ran. With some adjustments, they could use it to pull a sled with the horses. Lila agreed. That night they prepared. Jonah checked the fuel, tightened bolts, made sure the sled was lined with blankets. Lila packed extra food, water, and medicine. They set off before dawn, the sky dark blue, stars still clinging to the heavens. The horses followed without protest, trusting Jonah by now. The journey was rough. Snowdrift swallowed parts of the path. Hidden rocks threatened to trip the yearling. Wind howled through the canyon walls. At one point, the mare reared, startled by a sudden gust. Jonah reached out, voice steady, hand open. She calmed. They kept moving. Halfway through the trip, the sky turned gray. Another storm. They barely made it to a shallow cave before the wind tore through the valley, blinding them with snow. Inside, they built a small fire, huddled close to keep warm. The horses lay close together, the mare curling protectively around the yearling. Jonah stared into the flames, thinking. He remembered being alone after the war, how silence used to feel heavy, suffocating. Now, sitting beside strangers, both human and animal, it felt different, peaceful. Lila stirred beside him. "You're good with them," she said quietly. He shrugged. They just needed someone. "So, did you?" By morning, the storm had passed. The path ahead was clearer. They continued, reaching the frozen creek, where Lila's team waited. 2 volunteers helped load the horses onto the transport truck, careful not to jostle the injured leg. Jonah stood by as the door closed. The yearling looked at him one last time, ears forward. He touched the mare's nose through the gap. "Take care of each other," he whispered. Then the truck pulled away, disappearing into the snowy distance. Back at the cabin, Jonah stood in the empty pen. Tracks gone, straw flattened, silence returned, but it didn't feel the same. He brewed coffee, sat by the fire, and stared out the window. The mountains stretched beyond, endless and untouched. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Photos, updates, progress. The horses were healing, stronger now, ready to return to the wild. Lila invited him to be there when they were released. He read the letter twice, then folded it carefully, tucking it into his coat pocket. Yes, he would go. Months later, Jonah stood on a ridge, wind blowing through his hair. Below, the 3 mustangs, now fully recovered, galloped freely across the hills. The mare led, the yearling followed, and the stallion brought up the rear. They were home, and so was he. Moral lesson. Sometimes, saving others helps us heal ourselves.